lead this in. Let me know when you are ready to go.
I am ready.
All right. Vikings Commanders, the battle of two teams with revenge games at quarterback. Welcome to Crossover Thursday. Hello, Vikings fans. Hello, Commanders fans. It's Crossover Thursday. That means Locked On Vikings and Locked On Commanders collabing on this Thursday episode, previewing the upcoming game, Vikings at Commanders. I would be remiss if I did not mention this is Kirk Cousins' first time back in Washington since leaving the Commanders, which is actually kind of weird. It's been like 5 years, but I guess we just never played a road game over there. It's always been a different NFC East team. One game against the Commanders at US Bank, but also this is Taylor Heineke's first game against the Minnesota Vikings, I believe, right? So that's also a bit of a story. The Vikings let him go way back in 2016, sort of lived to regret it as he became, at the very least, a solid backup quarterback. It's been a problem for the Vikings. So I guess let's start with that. How do you feel about this quarterback matchup as somebody who covered Kirk Cousins for so many years and is now covering Taylor Heineke?
Yeah, Luke, good to be with you. First off, I did cover Kirk Cousins from the minute he walked in the door here in 2012, and I got to know Kirk very well, and we still stay in contact. And I know he's very much looking forward to reliving some fond memories that he had, as he told me earlier this week, of returning to FedExField. And like you said, he's already faced the organization once. I believe that was back in 2019 on a
Thursday night. Yeah.
Right. Thursday Night Football. He didn't play particularly well in that game. So, maybe some of that, got it out of his system. But you're right. This is his first time at FedEx Field since the end of the 2017 season. And certainly it did not end well. The last couple of years were constant angst around here because of the contract. And we could revisit all that. I would take like another couple of episodes to revisit that. I mean, clearly he's moved on. The Commanders really have not ever been able to find a sustainable replacement for him. You mentioned Taylor Heineke. Clearly, Heineke is the starting quarterback for the Washington Commanders for this game and for now moving forward in replace of the injured Carson Wentz. And quite honestly, we may have seen Heineke in this game anyway because Wentz was struggling so much even before the injury. Luke, what Heineke brings is different than what Kirk Cousins brings. Of course, Kirk Cousins is a throw on schedule, throw on platform, throw by design type quarterback, as you know. Taylor Heineke is pretty much the opposite of that. I mean, he is at his best when he is improvising, when he is off platform, off schedule. That doesn't mean he can't throw from the pocket, but he does struggle for long stretches from the pocket in a traditional offense where they are trying not to boot him, waggle him, sprint him, have him dart all over the place, and have him basically be Houdini. So it's a really interesting contrast of styles between the two quarterbacks. But quite honestly, even though the Commanders haven't scored a lot of points in the last 2 weeks, 23 against Green Bay and 17 against the Colts, excuse me. Sorry. Even though they haven't scored a lot of points, the offense has been at times more productive and looked more interesting, let's call it that way, under Taylor Heineke than it did under Carson Wentz.
Yeah, when I saw the news that Carson Wentz was going to be out for a while and it would be Heineke, my first thought was, darn, I would rather go against Wentz, I think.
Right.
It has been a weird journey of quarterbacks since Case Keenan through Dwayne Haskins and all of the weird other things that have happened to Washington. I would be remiss if I didn't quick ask you about all of the business side stuff that's going on. Yet another federal investigation. By my count, that's number 3 going on right now for the Commanders. And
I lost count a long time ago.
So the feds are all up in the Commanders' business, and Dan Snyder may be looking to sell the team now and all that stuff. I don't need you to get into all of that. I can just direct my listeners, listen to Locked On Commanders for all of what you need to know on that. But what I would ask is, does this have any effect on the players, or is this like when you see stock price news and you work at Walmart and you're a greeter and it's like, well, that doesn't change anything for me.
Yeah, it's a fascinating question, and yes, we have, of course, full coverage at Locked On Commanders, but I don't believe that this directly affects the players. They were asked about it on Wednesday. They've been asked about it over the last couple of weeks. They were asked about it from time to time, and all of them say, "Listen, you can't ignore, or you can't." Yeah, you can't ignore the outside noise, but we have one job. We control this. We have no control over that. Honestly, in many cases, most of the players don't even know Dan Snyder personally, right? I'm sure,
Mhm.
yeah, like he knows Terry McLaurin and he knows Jonathan Allen and he might know Taylor Heineke and Carson Wentz, but he doesn't have any direct dealings with the players by and large like it used to be around here. And so, from that respect, I don't really think they know anything other than that's the man who signs my paycheck.
Hmm.
Again, the only time that they probably think about it is when they're asked about it. And maybe I'm sure in their personal lives, hey, what's going on with Dan Snyder? What, like, is he going to sell the team? And they're probably like, I don't know. I don't care. I mean, you know how football players are. They
Right. They're in their
compartmentalize things.
world.
Exactly. Ron Rivera, I do think all of the chaos, all of the controversy over the last couple of years, I not only think, I know it has drained him to no end between everything that he's been dealing with, on a personal level and a professional level. I know that it is taken its toll on Ron Rivera. How could it not? But in terms of the actual players, I don't think so. I do wonder this though. Sunday, when Kirk and the Vikings come into FedEx Field, like you mentioned, for the first time that he has been with. And Kevin O'Connell, the head coach, obviously was the offensive coordinator here until the end of the 2019 season. And Ben Kotwica, who's on their staff, and Wes Phillips were all, here during many years of
Hmm.
chaos and consternation. So they're all used to kind of things. They're going to be wearing their black uniforms, the Commanders, and they're going to be having what's called a blackout. You've
Oh,
seen that
cool.
at Penn State, like with the whiteout. So
I used to do that in
uh,
high school.
yeah, well, sometimes that's what it reminds you of around here.
Yeah, it's
It's
fun.
sometimes a Mickey Mouse operation. But the reason why I bring that up is because with the news of Dan Snyder possibly and potentially selling, I think it will galvanize the fan base between what they're trying to do from a marketing perspective and just that elation and that joy and that relief that
Mm.
a lot of Commanders fans are feeling right now. I think it might add to a more home field atmosphere than they
Hmm.
normally have, which is to say virtually none.
I was gonna say, like, Vikings fans travel pretty well.
Yeah.
We've heard a lot of skull chants at road games in the
Mhm.
last couple of years. But maybe if there's all that galvanization, it is interesting. The Kevin O'Connell was asked about, like, hey, you're going back to, like, you played with Kirk, you were coached Kirk Cousins a few years ago in that stadium. What was that like? And he kind of waxed poetic about how much he saw Kirk Cousins grow in that 2017 season. And I guess that is the one of the key stories of this season for the Vikings, outside of are they for real, which you're always going to ask when they're beating teams by one score and all that. But the growth of Kirk Cousins under Kevin O'Connell has always been like, can he do that? When O'Connell came in, interviewed for the job, the head coaching job, his pitch was, I can fix Kirk Cousins. I
Mhm.
can get him to push the ball down the field more. I can get him to play more aggressively. I can get him to be more situationally aware. One of his big things has been situational masters. We want to have everybody aware of exactly where the sticks are, what third downs mean, what happens when the clock is different. Everybody needs to be super aware and really good at it. And I think that that'll help you a lot, especially in close games. When to keep him in bounds, when to make sure he gets out of bounds, that kind of stuff. Um, and that was a big blind spot for Kirk Cousins, that situational adaptation where his progression would need to change when it's in a 2-minute drill. You don't have any timeouts and you can't throw to the sideline. Or you can't throw in the middle. He would still throw to the middle, and then the clock would run out as they're trying to spike the ball. And you're like, Kirk, what are you
Right.
doing? So that relationship, considering the contrast between the relationship between Mike Zimmer and Kirk Cousins, who we just fired, and they didn't even talk, those two guys have a relationship that appears to be paying dividends. And I guess that's the biggest story of the Vikings for how they got to 6-1 to this point. But it's a long season, and they're definitely aware of that. They're also not like super thrilled with how they've played so far. I think they understand that there's a lot of improvement to be made, but I think we can talk about some individual players and matchups and stuff. There's some that I want to ask you about, especially on the outside there. But first, let me talk to you about Blue Nile. Blue Nile is where you can go to get that perfect gift for that special someone. Whether it's an engagement or an anniversary, or you just want to do something nice, Blue Nile has 24/7 online experts that are there to help you make sure you're getting the right thing. Like, do you know what a princess cut is? If not, you might need a little help. And that is what Blue Nile can do for you. So make your moment sparkle with Blue Nile. Go to BlueNile.com and enter code locked on to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. That's BLUENILE.com, code locked on to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. BlueNile.com, code locked on. This episode is also, of course, as all Crossover Thursdays are, brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Just pick your favorite 2 to 5 players, whether they will do better than their Prize Picks projection or not. And if you're right, you can win up to 10 times your money, and you can get a 100% deposit match up to $100 if you enter promo code locked on at prizepicks.com or on the Prize Picks app. Thanks again for making Crossover Thursday your first listen of the day, each and every day. Make sure you check out Locked On Sports today as well. I'm sure Peter will have some thoughts on the goings on with the Washington Commanders as well.
He may have a special guest or two in regards to that.
Is that a tease?
It's a tease. I mean, if you need more of me in your life, if you need more Dan Snyder, if you need more of me in your life, there's one place to go.
Perfect. Well, so let me ask you this. Let's focus on what's on the field.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is the most important matchup here? I have my thought for that, but I'm curious to see where do you think this game gets decided?
Yeah. So, look, I could go a couple of different ways, but for me, I'm going to go with Zadarius Smith, who's been so good for the Minnesota Vikings as a free agent addition. Can he generate enough pressure, enough heat against a very inconsistent offensive line? And I think he can, to really affect the passing game and as well the running game of the Washington Commanders, but specifically the passing game of Taylor Heinicke, who, yes, does have mobility and does have the ability to dance and dart and move around and extend plays and buy time that Carson Wentz did not. But Zadarius Smith can also just, kind of railroad a plan, if you will, to have a normal, efficient passing game, meaning an on-script passing game. Again, what the Commanders like to do is they like to operate with Taylor Heinicke, especially in the first half, but almost until they have like this desperate need. They like to be on schedule. They like to be normal. They like to be or try to establish rhythm from the pocket, and it doesn't always work. As a matter of fact, it often fails. And it did, in each of the last couple of games. And Taylor Heinicke is going to throw your 1 or 2 bad passes a game that get, potentially, are up for grabs and sometimes have been intercepted, as he has in each of the last 2 games. Had a pick 6 against Green Bay, had a interception deep in Washington territory that turned immediately into a touchdown. Again, he's going to give you opportunities, and if Zadarius Smith and, of course, the rest, of the Minnesota pass rush, can generate enough heat against, again, an inconsistent offensive line, I think that's where this game is probably going to be won for the Minnesota Vikings, at least defense versus offense. And obviously, again, just real quickly, and we'll expand upon this. I mean, listen, if Justin Jefferson gets going, and he's more than capable, as you know, that could be a long day at the office for the Washington Commanders because their cornerbacks stink.
That was going to be my question. So I had the same 2 answers, and then I have one that's the other way that I think is interesting. But the Vikings did a really good job against Arizona of getting Zadarius Smith one-on-one with a backup center. It's another backup center. So I wonder if they can just sort of copy paste some of that game plan and get those
Mhm.
one-on-ones, Darius Smith on Tyler Larson with no help. That's what the Vikings are going to want to do. And that's what Tyler Larson and Scott Turner and everybody are going to want to prevent.
Yep.
Vikings won that battle schematically last time. And if they can win it again, yeah, they can make it a long day. I also wanted to ask you, look, Terry McLaurin can move the ball, and the Vikings just gave up 159 yards to DeAndre Hopkins, basically by getting DeAndre Hopkins one-on-one with Cameron Dantzler, who has been a fine corner. He's been okay, but he is not going to hang with DeAndre Hopkins, and I don't think he can hang with Terry McLaurin either. So has getting one-on-ones with Terry McLaurin, also one-on-one with the slot corner Chandon Sullivan, who's been a mighty struggle this year. Has that been the way that the Commanders have wanted to get Terry McLaurin going?
Well, to be honest with you, before last Sunday, they really hadn't found a way to consistently get Terry going in any sort of capacity, with limited exception. Last week, one way they got him going was lining him up in the slot in a 3-by-1 formation to the right of Taylor Heineke, and he ran basically a quick stop route and then realized and broke off his route and realized his quarterback was drifting away from him and to the other side of the formation. And he just
He
took
just
off and broke away
went.
from the defender and ripped off a 42-yard catch and run. So one way that they could exploit the Minnesota Vikings, like you were just talking about, not only Dantzler, but also out of the slot where he can operate, again, as a traditional slot. He can operate out of a 3-by-1 or a 2-by-2 and be closer, to the bunch at the line of scrimmage. So they can operate in a number of different ways. And it doesn't look like they're going to have Jahan Dotson for a fifth consecutive game. Their first round rookie out of Penn State is a possibility, but I would say probably not, at least at this juncture. But they still have Curtis Samuel. They got Logan Thomas back, their tight end, who's still, dealing with a bunch of injuries. They are going to take their shots with Terry McLaurin because that's the best playmaker that they have, just like any other team with a great receiver. Again, Justin Jefferson, so on and so forth. So I do worry about that from a Minnesota perspective. But I would also say this, that if Minnesota can, again, make the Washington offense one-dimensional and take away the run and limit the run or control the run, then it's going to make it easier for them to kind of shade, cloud, cover, what have you.
Yeah.
McLaurin, the only other thing you would really have to watch out for is Antonio Gibson out of the backfield or lined up as a receiver, because he has been emerging more and more and more in that role.
Okay, and that's interesting because the Vikings, the biggest problem on the Vikings defense has been communication, and those scramble drills test your communication.
Yeah.
Depending on the situation, I mean, if you're in a man-to-man coverage, then you're just kind of chasing the guy around, and that's got its own challenges, but it's different. But in a zone structure, a zone match structure, even late in the play, you can pass a guy off, and you've got to be good at that. And can Taylor Heineke find those windows? That might be the avenue if the Commanders are going to win this game, is taking advantage of that. But what I'll say is that the Vikings have gotten a lot better at that in the last couple games, especially coming out of the bye. They were very good at it against Arizona. So that, and they like that, the coverage was really good against Arizona, except for the one-on-ones to DeAndre Hopkins was kind of the only pitch the Cardinals had, and it wasn't enough. That might be a really important thing. But I do want to talk a little bit about this Justin Jefferson matchup, because every team has taken, like, the league has sort of figured out their preferred strategy against Justin Jefferson. Let's get a safety on top of him. Make sure he is doubled all the time. Call your coverages that say this will be toward 18. 18 is in the play call. And the safety's on top of him no matter what. And some teams have even used the other safety to be on the other side of the ball, to poach if he has a crosser across the field. Just using as many resources as they can. Very few teams have just said, all right, you go cover Justin Jefferson. And the only team that really did that was the Saints with Marshawn Lattimore, and it didn't work. Jefferson got a go ball at the end of the game that ended up being like the key play. Even the Eagles with Darius Slay had help over the top sometimes. The Lions did really well against him with help over the top. Nobody else has really been able to stymie him that way. So do the Commanders have the corners that are capable of taking Justin Jefferson out of this game? And are they going to be willing to commit as hard to stopping Justin Jefferson and leaving everybody else one-on-one, TJ Hawkinson one-on-one now that he's part of the team, KJ Osborne, Adam Thielen, all are going to be one-on-one. Do they have the guys that can pull all that off?
The answer to that, in my opinion, is no. But the only guy that's potentially able to do that, again, in my analysis, would be second-year corner Benjamin St-Juste, who Vikings fans might know and remember from playing at the University of Minnesota, right? Now, BSJ, as we call him, struggled a little bit last week, but that's the first time that he's really struggled since being inserted in the starting lineup week 3 against Philadelphia, right after Philadelphia beat the Minnesota Vikings on Monday Night Football. So I think you can take, maybe they'll have some success like the Colts sort of did last week against Benjamin St-Juste, but I know that Justin Jefferson against Kendall Fuller is probably a big-time matchup advantage for the Minnesota Vikings. Yet, like you said, it's kind of like pick your poison. I mean, I know Thielen was a little bit banged up, but, assuming he plays, KJ Osborne, TJ Hawkinson.
He's limited, but I think he's going to go. Or maybe
right. TJ Hawkinson, I assume he'll have maybe a red zone role. I don't know how
he'll have a package, I bet.
Yeah.
He'll get in somewhere.
I think the Commanders are not going to be able to totally focus on Jefferson, because if you totally focus on Jefferson, obviously you get beat by the other guys, or more specifically, Dalvin Cook, right? As both a runner and as, I guess, a receiver. But to me, I think they play mostly zone, as most teams do. And like you said, a lot of match coverage. I think I don't think you'll see, again, Benjamin St-Juste march all around the field with Justin Jefferson. So when you get Jefferson matched up against Kendall Fuller, I think that's the best opportunity for Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings to have success. One other thing that you got to watch out for a little bit is a guy named Cameron Curl, a former 7th-round pick. He's not explosive in terms of speed, Luke, but he is always around the ball. He's a very smart, high IQ player. So maybe they'll be able to shade some coverage that way. But a lot of times they use him to kind of help in run support and to attack the line of scrimmage in a 3 safety look, what they call their Buffalo nickel, where instead of playing 3 corners, they'll play 3 safeties and 2 corners. So again, we could play the X's and O's crossover matchup all day long. Ultimately, it's going to be, hey, don't get killed by Justin Jefferson. Maybe give him something, but don't get killed by him.
He'll get his, but you just have to keep that contained and hope that the Commanders can win a game that comes down to something else. I've got the Bet Online line and the spread here, which we'll get to in a second. We'll start doing our predictions here. But first, a word about Bet Online. It's your one-stop shop for all things sports betting. Not only football, you can bet on the spreads. You can do player props. You can bet even right in the middle of a game. But basketball, hockey, baseball, all in season. Go bet on the World Series. All of that stuff you can find on Bet Online. Even golf, tennis, MMA, whatever. You can go to betonline.net where the game starts. So 3.5 point spread, over unders 43.5. The implication there is that the bettors think that this will be, call it 23-20, 24-21, maybe Vikings. Vikings favored by 3.5 on the road. What do you think? Are they on, or is that too low, too high, too much of one team?
So our listeners kind of get a little giddy when I pick the Washington Commanders to win, because I think I'm 3-0 when picking them to win this year. However, if you're injecting me with truth serum and I try and tell the truth, right? I have to tell it how I feel. I just don't think the Commanders' offense is good enough to put up mid-20s. So I see them being in that 17 to 20 point range, and shy of a pick six or a fumble return or something freaky, a long kickoff return that sets up a touchdown or maybe goes for a touchdown from an Antonio Gibson. I just don't see the Commanders scoring enough points to keep up with Kirk and the Minnesota Vikings and their array of weapons. So to me, I see the Minnesota Vikings winning this game. I see the Minnesota Vikings winning this game probably between 4 and 7 points. And I think we'll go over the Bet Online total if I had to guess.
I think I'm with you on all of that.
That seems reasonable, right?
Yeah, I think I'm with you on all of that. The Vikings have not yet shown me that they are capable of winning a game by more than one score. So I
Mhm.
would have to assume that this once again will be a one score game and that the final minutes of the game will be relevant to it. I would love to see the Vikings just put someone away, but I haven't seen it so far. The over under for Washington is 20 and a half points scored on Bet Online. I like that under, I think, too, because as much as I like Heineke's improvisational thing, and as much as Terry McLaurin kind of scares me with the holes in the Vikings secondary, they played a little better recently, and that is a couple of things that are scary, but it does not an offense make. And I think you need something more complete. And I don't, from what you have told me, it doesn't sound like the Commanders have it. So I like that Washington under as well. But I also like in total the over because I think the Vikings can score. And if I think the Vikings can score and I don't think the Commanders can, I think I got to pick the Vikings to cover,
Right.
right? Call me
Right.
a homer, but that's the way that it feels to me. But I guess let's flip this around. It's Monday. The Commanders won. What's the story of that game? What are the headlines in that situation?
So the way I see them winning is if they can create enough takeaways
Okay.
to alter the the talent disparity, in my opinion. The Commanders are number 2 in the NFL on third down defense, right? They are really good on third down. They might emphasis might get Chase Young back on a very limited package for the first time in almost a year. Again, that
Hmm.
is not definite. That is a might. Um, and if they can force third and longs, if they can get off the field like they have done a really good job of this year, and if they could somehow create a turnover or two, they've lived off of turnovers during this 3 games winning streak that they had at Chicago. They led up almost 400 yards to Fields and the Bears' pedestrian offense. Yet they forced 3 takeaways, turnover on downs or takeaways inside the 5 yard line. And then last week they forced 2 takeaways, including both right around the red zone area. So taking and had a goal line stand as well. So, or I'm sorry, not a goal line, not a true goal line stand, but a stand where they were at the 1 yard line with first down and they forced a field goal out of it. So again, they've
Hmm.
done a really good job in that area. So if the
Hmm.
Washington Commanders are going to win, I think that's really the only legitimate way that they do it, unless there's a special teams freaky type situation that again probably we can't count for. But I would also tell you this. I know, Joseph drives you guys crazy from time to time. Joey Sly, the Washington place
Yeah.
kicker, is somebody that I have a hard time trusting. He's missed too many kicks in preseason and the regular season and all off season, Luke, for me to feel confident about the Commanders in that area.
Yeah, Vikings fans will basically never want a game to come down to a kick ever in their lives, and that's fair. So two things on that I think are kind of doom that scenario. But if that like takeaways can always happen, right? You can just get a Kirk Cousins just totally screws up and throws 4 picks, and like that can happen, right? But the Vikings right now have scored on 18 of their 27 red zone trips.
Hmm.
66.7, 2/3 of the time. That's fifth best in the league in their red zone. Their red zone offense has been fantastic. A lot of that has been Kevin O'Connell scheming up freebies on the goal line. A lot of those touchdowns have been nobody really had to execute very much because the play call was just so the motion was so good and it was so genius that it was a walk in. Um, I would imagine he's not out of tricks by week 9. So I feel like the red zone offense is one of the strengths of the Vikings. And the other thing is the special teams for the Vikings it's one of the like unsustainable things that make people not believe in the Vikings. They're good for like a punt fumble a game right now, and the
Hmm.
returns have been good. They're in the top of the league in like field position metrics.
Hmm.
Basically everything but the kicking has been fantastic. Matt Daniels
Right.
is kind of the special teams coordinator, is kind of a breakout superstar. And then also one matchup that'll be interesting if Chase Young gets a lot of run will be Chase Young versus Christian Darrisaw. Christian Darrisaw is our left tackle.
Yes.
He's been having a breakout. I genuinely think he should be an all pro. He is having a breakout season. He's just stealing souls. Chase Young would be a really interesting matchup.
I would just point out that if Chase Young plays, he's going to play a very, very, very limited role in this game. And also, if you don't mind, I want to give a shout out to my guy Ben Kotwica, who's part of Matt Daniels' coaching. He's I think his official title is assistant special team. He's a terrific coach. I worked with him. We talk on a regular basis. He's such a good man and a good coach. So I think he's helped them out in that regard as well. So that's I'm really happy, to see some of the success that you guys have had in that regard. And I think this, I think this Vikings team is for real. I picked them to win the division before the year, and so far nothing has really surprised me. And I think the best is still yet to come. And I'm looking forward to seeing them in person on Sunday.
Well, I appreciate that, and I sure hope that all of your predictions come true. So, Commanders fans, thank you for listening. You can find me at Luke Braun NFL, Locked On Vikings. Vikings fans, you can find Locked On Commanders wherever you listen to Locked On Vikings, and of course, vice versa on all of that. For Chris Russell, I'm Luke Braun. This has been Crossover Thursday. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you tomorrow.